So ideally, you can see the right screen right now. I see a nod, so we can move on.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today in our session. We will be focusing today on the overall methodology that has to be followed in order to pitch to various entities. And of course, the label here is access to investors, but of course, the art of pitching, let's say, can be used also in case you want to pitch to other entities beyond investors. I see that you will be probably seeing the entire screen instead of the proper window, so let me fix this real quick. There. Is it better now?
I think it's fine, Orpheus. Yeah, we can see the full screen now.
Okay. So, moving on, the term of pitching and that of the pitch is inspired by sports. It's the act of throwing a ball towards an entity. We will not be talking about the scoring in this specific activity, but the overall idea here is that you want to present and in general terms promote a product or an idea to persuade a specific audience about what you are evangelizing. The audience can, of course, be investors, but in some other cases, it can also be potential customers. It can be partners with which you would like to collaborate in the future. And in general, it can be any other supporting entities that you foresee that it's worth connecting with. So today, we will be focusing mainly on aspects that are related to pitching to investors, but you will be able to see that quite a few of the techniques and aspects we will be analyzing can, of course, be used in any other forms of pitching. So, in general terms, there are quite many pitching elements that have to be studied in order for someone to be prepared to deliver a proper pitch. There are quite many aspects to be studied related to the art of communication, the art of persuasion, the art of preparing all the relevant material and presenting it. And here you can see indicatively some of these aspects, such as knowing how to create specific hooks for your audience, minding your own body language, summarizing information, using some charisma, let's say, during your presentation, etc. Although all of these aspects are relevant to how you should pitch, most of them will not be taken under consideration today because this is not a seminar about communication soft skills. However, what we will be talking about today is what the content of a pitch should be, so what you have to present during pitching, and also how to present it in the sense of preparing your slides. So any other aspects about presentation, such as body language, overall communication skills, etc., will not be covered, but of course, there is far more material online available for this, but of course can extend beyond the art of pitching to any kind of communication you want to undertake. So, moving on with the first section of the session that will be related to what you have to present during your pitch deck. We will be following a pretty ugly example of a pitch deck we have created. Some of the slides are built in a way to show you how you should present things, but also some other slides are built in a way so that it becomes apparent what you should avoid. In any case, the first part of the session should be all about you understanding what are the main thematic areas that should be covered in the pitch deck and the overall strategy you should follow during the presentation. So, moving on ahead with this, Briefly, the contents that you would want to have in the great majority of pitching events are the following. First and foremost, it's a problem. We've seen quite many startups beginning from something different, from their vision, from the presentation of a team, from the solution. And although there are some exceptions, most of the time, what is more ideal is actually building everything from the initial point of the ideation, which is a problem. So the very first slides of your pitching should make clear, first of all, who is the potential customer, and secondly, what is the customer-centric problem you want to resolve. Anything else is secondary and should build on top of this initial introduction. Naturally, most of the time after the problem presentation, what comes next is the presentation of a solution, which most of the time is also the favorite part of the companies to present, because that's where they feel more confident and more happy about and excited to share news on. And relevant to that, there is a non-mandatory section, but a section that may be helpful in case of some kind of deep tech idea, where you also extend a little bit further on the technology and the science based on your solution works. So we refer in general terms to this slide as the magic behind the solution, and that's just an opportunity for a company to dig a little bit deeper on the very fundamentals on which the overall solution or service is being based. Now, the very next sessions should be related to the entrepreneurial aspect of what you want to present. So it's important to go on with the presentation of the market in both quantitative and qualitative means. And based on top of this, you should extend directly to the overall business pricing and the revenue model you want to introduce. So beyond going through the various answers to questions such as, is there a market? Is it big enough? Will people pay for this? You should also identify why people will pay you, how they will pay you, every when, and how much. The next point is relevant to the fact that you have to persuade people that the actual market you've identified and the actual customers you've identified would actually choose you over any other entity, or at least it would be possible for you to capture a proportion of the market. To do that, it's necessary to present a complete or mostly complete competition analysis, and in parallel, your positioning compared to this competition and what makes you unique. So it's not enough to state that you have a solution for a problem and it is cheap. You also have to show why you will be the team that will succeed compared to any other entities. Finally, the next section should be related to the overall resources available to the team and the activities of the team behind this endeavor. So you should focus on both the strengths of the individuals that consist and create your own team, but also the overall mentality, history, vision, traditions, and so on and so forth of the entirety of your team. And relevant to that, you should present both what you've already achieved and what are the future steps to follow. Finally, the section that most of the startups we've come across tend to omit, either on purpose or by accident, is actually one of the most interesting parts for a potential investor. And that's that is the slides related to any kind of financials. So as we will see, when you want to present to an investor, you should respect their time. Most of the investors are having meetings with hundreds of startups every year. So most of the time, you don't have more than one chances to talk to them. So from the very beginning, from the very first contact with them, you should present a very clear investment proposal and plan to them, and not keep it generic and tell them that you just want to come into contact with them and have an ideation session with them, or get some advice for them on which idea of yours looks better or worse. On the contrary, what you should do is to have a very clear view of what is the budget you need in order to get into the market or to scale your business. And beyond identifying how much money you need, which is the ask, what you ask from the investors, you should also be able to present some, at the very least, initial financial projections that can showcase how profitable or investable your company can be. If this information is missing, then most investors most probably will not show much interest, or they will have to spend some extra time with you in order to get the information they require. So in this case, you have to be proactive and go to this specific meeting ready. Now, moving on the example presentation that we talked about, your very first slide should be very clean. We've seen quite many pitch decks, starting with many logos from all the supporting entities, a lot of names, the name of a company, mottos, a small summary of a company, etc., etc. This is not a very good approach, because what you need in this case is to be as memorable as possible and as impactful as possible. And the only way to do this most of the time is actually to keep things simple. So if you want people to remember the name of your company or your product, this should be pretty much the only thing that appears on your first slide, apart from any other simple visuals you will be using or a simple motto that you would like to introduce. But if you see that a visual or some other names would make things more confusing for the potential audience, then just avoid it and introduce this information in the later slides. Now, as it was stated, the very first slide should be related to the presentation of a problem, which should be, of course, be customer-centric, as it was suggested. And depending on the language you want to use and introduce, in some cases you may want to sound a little bit more positive. So instead of referring to a specific problem, you may want to refer to a specific opportunity or a concept. The reason to not do that in some cases is that the usage of the word problem creates some kind of urgency and necessity, which is not a bad thing, because in your case, you want to showcase that there is actual a necessity for the usage of your solution. In any case, any words of that sort are completely fine, as long as they introduce, first of all, the potential customer, and secondly, what are their needs. So as you can see here, we have a quite crowded slide that starts with a potential entity of interest, the potential customer, a short introduction to their problem, and to make it a little bit more quantitative and informational, it adds some extra information and statistics related to the presented problem, and for scientific reasons also the relevant references. The next slide, which should be related to the solution, should state first of all what the actual solution does. It shouldn't get into the technicalities and into the very specific features that are available, but it should present a very high-level description of the actual solution, meaning what it is. Is it software? Is it hardware? Is it a combination of these two? Is it an application? Is it an online platform? Okay, what is it? And what does it do? What are its functionalities? It provides early warnings, some kind of monitoring, detection, prediction, decision-making, etc., etc. You can see here that beyond this information, we haven't introduced any kind of dashboards, user interfaces, functionalities that are too technical to present, and in most cases are secondary and not quite necessary to present from the very beginning. Now, once you make this general introduction, as it was suggested, in case the market you want to tackle or the solution you introduce is a little bit complex or needs extra domain information that many investors may be lacking because they are not experts of the field, you may want also to add one or two, not more, extra slides to expand a little bit further on the fundamentals of the solution. So if you want to present most of the time in a visual manner how your solution works from an architectural point of view or an operational or deployment point of view, this is a good chance for you to do in a simple manner so that you don't get lost. But once again, as you can see, we don't get into the very specifics of the overall product presentation. Now, the next step should be towards quantifying the market, because this is one of the first information you can provide to the potential investors so that they can start aggregating some numerical data that they can use in order to make calculations and start getting an idea of how valuable your solution is. And this kind of value that they may infer out of these numbers may be quite promising because it is directly linked to the money they would like to give you in order to get a percentage of your company. So in general terms, what we've noticed is that most startups either present the monetary value of their market. For example, they state that our company is working into a multi-billion market, or in some other cases, they present the absolute numbers of the potential customers that could be approached. Very rarely we see both of these numbers being presented. However, through some examples, you will understand that you actually need both types of this information. First of all, if you only present the monetary value, it may be that all this value is created from very few potential clients, meaning that the market may seem very big from a monetary point of view, but your actual chances of capturing it and having some kind of market penetration are quite low, because if there are only 10 entities working on this sector, getting even one entity out of them may be very, very hard due to the already established market. On the other hand, if you focus only on the absolute numbers of potential entities, you will not be able to identify whether reaching out to, for example, 1,000 companies is enough for you in order to have sufficient money and revenues or not. For example, if you are working on a subscription-based application that is directed to a massive market of many individuals paying just a few euros or dollars every month, then you have to showcase that not only their absolute numbers are great, but their willingness to pay is also represented by an analogous monetary value. So our advice here is for the companies to try to extract both numbers, both the monetary size of the market, but also the absolute number of potential entities. And beyond identifying what is the overall market like, it is always very important and useful to actually have some kind of zooming in of categorization and of segmentation of the market. So presenting the overall global market is nice, but most probably no company will be able to capture all of this. So zooming in and identifying the serviceable or obtainable market from the company, which is the actual market that the company could possibly expect to have based on its status and resources, is the actual number that ideally the company would present. Building on top of this, the company should present a very clean and direct business model. Here you can see that we have a quite complex model being presented. Actually, it has 3 or more different revenue streams, which makes things a little bit more simple. And it's a common characteristic for young startups to try and capture as many revenue streams as possible. Many times, this is not the ideal approach because unlocking a new revenue stream implies some extra work that has to take place, which also implies extra money, effort, and money that have to be spent in order to unlock this revenue stream. So the advice to new startups in this case is to, at the very least, at the beginning of the endeavor, try to focus and unlock only 1, maximum 2 revenue streams at the very beginning, and later on, based also on the maturity of the solution and the market, introduce any other channels they want. Now, beyond identifying the business model, also having a good idea of the actual pricing is very important because this more or less may answer to the question regarding the willingness of the potential customers to pay, but also give a good idea regarding the pricing comparison between the company and any other potential competitors. Now, one of the most important slides is that related to the unique selling proposition or points or point, the USP as an acronym. And this is where the company should identify why, from the eyes of a potential customer, the solution being presented is an ideal one. So the focus of this slide should be not on technical characteristics and technicalities and functionalities, but on specific value that is provided. So most of the time, the potential customers want to hear about reduced costs, increased income, greater speed, greater reliability, greater precision, user friendliness, available support, low cost for a solution, anything that can be translated to some kind of value, monetary or non-monetary value. So the focus here should be on aspects like this and not on the means through which the value is going to be provided. For example, if you study the current slide, you will see that there are no references to technical features of a solution. For example, that of the hardware or of the software. Now, the next slides are quite relevant. These focus a little bit more on the presentation of the competition and the differentiation of a company towards it. So here you will see that there are quite many ways to make a visual comparison with other entities. A very common one is a two-dimensional comparison, which is quite narrow, but from a visual point of view, quite satisfactory and engaging, where you can make a very good distinction between the various tactics and the positionings of other companies compared to your own. So identifying two different axes of which there is interest for the potential customers and trying to map the other entities in your company on them is one of the ways to do this. Another very efficient way, though, to present your state compared to other entities is a comparison matrix. So here, ideally, what you do is creating different rows, different lines, working on different aspects of offers you provide or features, and also provide different columns for different entities. Okay, this should be competitor 1, 2, 3, 4. We missed that point. And the last column should be your own company. So here what you do is identifying different aspects and features or points of value of comparison with various competitors and identify who covers what, how much they cover it, how much it costs, and ideally if you do this, then you can have a very clean view of which competitor is best at each area of comparison. And ideally, what you would like to have is a view where your own company actually has more points when it comes to winning all these comparisons compared to the other entities. Now, moving on and being close to finalizing the pitch deck, it is important to present your team. Depending on how mature it is or not, you may want to focus on very different aspects. But in general, what you want to achieve is to present a very extensive view of the overall team. So you should focus not only on your founders, but if your team is quite big, also present at least the numbers of the supporting personnel in your company. On the other hand, if your team is quite small, you may also want to present the active advisors and mentors that are available to you, especially if you build a structured and official advisory board. And in many other cases, it may also be worth presenting all the supporting entities that are linked to you. So if you have any other supporters, partners, incubators or accelerators, or any other entities that have helped you in any way in the past, then this is the point where you can present this part. So, one of the last points is to present a clear view of the actions that have already taken place and the actions that you plan to follow on with in the future. And this should be mostly presented in a manner of identifying specific milestones. In general, milestones are important points of interest in time, which are worth of celebration. So identifying 2 or 3 past points of interest that are worth presenting, such as the completion of your demo or acquiring your first customers or your first investment, and identifying some other milestones in the future, 3 to 5 of them that are relevant to future activities and goals, is a very nice way to very quickly identify what's the current status of your company and towards which direction you are moving on. In this slide, you will see that we've actually used too many points of interest. Having less than that, 5 or 6 is ideal, and most of them should be quite noteworthy. For example, unless it's very tied to your product, acquiring some kind of ISO certification may not be worth celebrating, but getting your patent accepted or at least filed is quite important. So this is something you should present. Now, the last part, which should not be omitted, is related to the presentation of the overall financial status. So what this should entail is a very clear identification of how much money you need and for how much money. For example, we need 300,000 euros for the next 18 months. You also have to identify how you will split this kind of funding to different activities. And by using also the previous slide, you also have to state what milestones you will achieve with this money. So beyond identifying which areas you will spend this money, it's of even higher importance to identify what you will achieve with this money. Because at the end of the day, potential investors care about end results. How many customers you will have achieved to get, how much you will be able to increase the value of the company, and so on and so forth. The last part for you is to help the investors get an idea about the actual value of your company. There aren't too many ways to do that. One way to do this is to provide an in-depth view of your financial projections. So by presenting historical data regarding your financials and also some estimations about your future projections is one way to do this. And another way to do this is also to identify other companies similar to you in a similar domain that have been acquired by other companies. They have been sold, and through the value for which they were sold, you can make some assumptions about the actual value of your own company. Last but not least, you need an outro slide, again with your logo so that it's memorable, any contact details you want to provide, and after that, you should be eager to have a kind of follow-up with the investors, if need be, during an event on breaks, during an online presentation, by connecting with them online, etc. Now, that was it about the format of the presentation. As it was stated, what you have to keep from what was presented already is not that much the look and feel of the slides, but more the actual content that has to be provided and be in place. Now, having in mind what has to be presented, we will focus on a few rules, fundamental rules that should be followed by the companies, which we have extracted after seeing and observing some of the most common, let's say, pitfalls in which new startups fall. So, moving on, one of the first rules is that you should not ignore the scope and the judging criteria of a specific meeting, presentation, or event that is in place. As it was stated, the pitching can take place not only towards investors, but it may be under the framework of a competition. It may be in an event where you want to capture the attention of stakeholders. It may also be something you present somewhere in order to acquire new customers or new partners. So for each one of them, focusing on your actual audience, you should get in their shoes and identify what their judging criteria are. If all of the startups were doing this and were thinking like the investors do, they would identify right away, for example, that a slide related to the financials of a company should not be missing, because the job of the investors is to find investable startups and to identify the investability of a company. They need some numbers related to the value of the company, their financials, how much money they require, etc. So there is a simple rule about this. You should identify the judging criteria. You should cover them all. And beyond covering them all, you should give to each one of them the appropriate time, detail, and attention. Something very common, especially when there is little time available to startups, for example, 5 or 10 minutes to pitch, is that the company spent about 70 or 80% of their time talking about the problem and the solution, because this is the most interesting part for them, and spend only 20% or 30% on everything else, which is about the market size, competition presentation, unique selling proposition, team presentation, and financials. You can see that 5 topics are getting only a very small percentage of the time of the presentation. And of course, this means that the quality of the presentation is not good enough. So what teams have to do in this case is actually to spend 15% of their time on the problem solution, and likewise a similar percentage to every other section and criterion that has been identified. Now, depending on your audience or the event, there may be in place some extra judging criteria, such as, I don't know, sustainability criteria, impact criteria, impact on educational or environmental topics, etc. So accordingly, you should update your pitch deck and spend sufficient time on this topic. On the other hand, if you have any information that is not answering to any of the judging criteria, then it's a loss of time for you. And since the time is quite limited most of the time, it's better not to include this information, even if it's quite valuable and quite noteworthy to you. So keep in mind that the presenters have a tendency to focus on things that they like sharing, and accordingly they spend more time on this, or to things they feel more confident about, while trying to skip other things they haven't practiced on. But where you should actually focus is the actual presentation of all the necessary topics that should be presented. A nice tip to follow when you create a slide and you want to study its various elements is to ask yourself, so what? Pretend you are the audience, you read the element of information you've provided in the slide and ask yourself, so what? Did this increase any, did this information give you any extra points in any of the criteria? Did it help in persuading the audience, or it was just nice to know information? If the information you provide does not offer you anything on the topic of the judging criteria, then do not include it. The same, of course, applies not only to the information, but also the various visuals you are going to present. Okay, overcrowding your presentation with too many visual elements many times may actually work against you instead of making your presentation more attractive. Now, another point of interest that is related to the previous one is that beyond knowing your audience and their judging criteria, you should also have some kind of overall situational awareness. So in many cases, of course, you want to know exactly what is the nature of your audience, what are their wants, what do they expect to achieve. Okay, for example, investors expect to find startups to invest on, not just nice to have ideas or general invitations to connect. They want to invest to startups. You have to also have a good idea about the audience expertise. If you're working on something very advanced, you may want to avoid using terminology that is not very well known, or you may want to simplify some terms or the context that you present. And you should also be aware of the status of the audience and the means of the presentation. A few examples about the two last points, beyond the time that's available and the time of the date. Think of these scenarios. The audience has already seen another 10 presentations, because in many cases, you may be pitching during an event and not in a one-on-one manner with some investors. This means that your audience has already gone through more than 100 slides, is already looking on a screen and listening to people for 15 minutes. So if you get in their shoes, you may understand that actually the less information you have in your slides, the easier it will be probably be for them to absorb this information and be able to remember it. So in these cases, we have a scenario where less is more. And the more you want people to remember about you, the less information you have to include and push into your slides. On the other hand, the audience may be back from their lunch and they may be a little bit sleepy already, or you may be the last thing that separates from them. In such cases, you may joke about it and exploit this peculiarity, but also you may have to adapt and simplify things a little bit more, or focus on the very basics you would like them to know about, because they will be simply not able to capture all the information you want to give them. And finally, you want to make a differentiation between the means of providing your presentation. For example, today I am showing you a presentation online. So the slides I've prepared have not too big nor too small fonts. I also have quite a lot of text, not too little, but also not too much. And also the visuals I use are in the size that I know that will be visible in your screens. However, if I were to use the same presentation live at a stage where there is only a small screen available, then these slides would not be good enough. If I wanted to present this presentation to you live in a physical event, then I would have to remove words and I would have to increase the font size by a lot. So what you have to take into consideration is that actually your pitch deck will not have only one version. You will need one version which will be very detailed with small fonts, a lot of schematics, many slides, that will have all the information you want people to study, and will be the version that you send through an email, for example. So you want a version that will be readable. You want, of course, a different version that will be presentable online, as I'm doing today, which of course should have less slides and less information. And finally, you would want to have a third version, which is for a physical presentation, which should be the simplest one, with the biggest letters and the less words and graphics available, the fewer graphics and elements available. So you already have 3 different versions. Take under consideration that the size of a presentation may be different based on whether you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes to present something. And you can already understand that you should actually have 5 different versions for your pitch deck with a different quantity of information and a different positioning of the elements and their size. Now, some hints. You can see that this text is not visible or easily readable, so plan accordingly, having in mind the actual viewers. Take also in mind that people can read 4 words per second, so including slides with entire paragraphs is not quite helpful, and ensure that the slides actually accompany your presentation and not dictate it. This means that you shouldn't read from your slides, and ideally what you want people to do is listening to you and only going through the slides in order to capture also in a visual manner the information you want to promote. So using just a few keywords with bold and a few key phrases is enough in order to accompany your presentation, but you don't want to include too much information that would make the audience read the slides instead of listening to you. Okay, this is one of the worst things that can happen. On the other hand, the opposite may also happen. They may stop reading the slides because there is too much information and start listening only to you, but in this case, what's the point of the slides? So you have to find a balance and identify that the slides here should include only the essence of the information you want to provide and pitch. Now, we actually have an interesting example, which is very common when it comes to startups that want to present an idea focused on an environmental problem or a health problem. So here is just an example, but you can see that this may be extended in quite many other scenarios. So a short pitch here is that we have a new startup that identifies the problem of the CO2 emissions on a global level. It introduces a very nice innovative technology that is based on whatever, it doesn't matter. In any case, every few years, these buzzwords presented here change. And the final value proposition they present is that they are saving the world. This may be true, but this is not the right approach to create a pitch deck. Why? Because the world will never be your customer. Your customer will always be specific individuals and specific companies. So when you present the problem, you shouldn't present a problem that is humanitarian, that is a human problem. You should present a customer problem. So unfortunately, the way that the current financial and political system has been built globally, the fact that the environment is being destroyed is no concern for a specific company or a specific individual. So most probably very few entities would pay just to save the environment. However, these same entities would indeed pay if they were to save money. So instead of presenting this problem, the company could actually state that due to new European legislation, shipping companies have to reduce their CO2 emissions. And if they do not do so by 2030, they will be fined and they will have to pay money. In this case, what we've done is that we have rephrased the problem a little bit. We've made clear who is the customer, it's shipping companies, and we've also made clear why they would like to pay for a solution. Because if they don't, they will lose money. So the advice here is that you should always prepare your entire pitch deck based on a problem, and not just a problem, but on a customer-centric problem. So you start by identifying the problem you want to address, ensure that this problem has a customer, ensure that this customer is not humanity, it's specific companies, specific individuals that want to pay not because they want to save humanity, but due to their own self-interest, and conduct thorough market research so that you can also identify and quantify the nature and the size of a specific market. So with this way, you can gauge the interest that is available for these potential customers and get your very first customer feedback. Just to give you an idea, one of the main reasons that many top startups working on new technologies fail, surprisingly, is the fact that they build solutions for problems that do not exist and for markets that actually do not exist. This may sound weird, but indeed this is the case when you get teams of exceptional engineers and scientists that have a specific problem only on their mind. They don't try to confirm the existence and nature of the problem with the actual market and build a solution before actually having some kind of customer feedback. So a very important note here is that all startups, before going to an investor to pitch, should have had some kind of contact with potential customers. To go to a potential customer, you don't need to have a prototype or a demo ready to show it to them. You can always just approach them in order to confirm their problems, get more details about them, use these details in the design of your solution as initial user requirements, and on top of this, if you can do this, also get some kind of early interest and confirmation about the validity of your solution for them. That's the ideal path. So it should be ensured that the actual solution being developed is directly linked to the problem that you're presenting. Now, another important point is that we see that quite many startups are afraid of presenting their competition. Why? Because they think that if they show that there are other entities that are competing in the market, then for some reason they will look less attractive to the investors. The truth is, though, exactly the opposite. If a company states that there is no competition, then this is a red alert for the investors, because for them, this means that something is very, 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 very wrong. Why? because they will start thinking, okay, if there is no competition in the market, then this may mean the following. Probably the problem does not exist. The problem may exist, but there may be no solution. The problem may exist and there may be a solution, but the solution may be too expensive or may need too much time to be developed. Or there may be a problem and there may be a solution, but the market may be too small. On the other hand, if you do show that there are competitors in there, then you answer to many questions actually about the nature of the problem, about the potential to solve the problem, about the size of the market, etc. So presenting competition is actually something positive, and it's something that should be presented. But once you do it, you should do it correctly and honestly, and focus not only on direct competition, but any kind of competition. A lot of startups, when they present their direct competition, think that direct competition is only the companies that solve the same problem with exactly the same technology. This is not quite true. Direct competition is any entity that solves the same problem for the same customer with whatever means. Beyond that, there is of course indirect competition. There is potential competition that may come from another segment with slight adoption of their technologies, or in some cases, the choice of doing nothing may also be a valid choice for the customer. So the fact that there is a problem and no one else is solving it doesn't mean necessarily that the potential customer will choose your company in order to solve it. You may be too expensive for them, and it may be less expensive for them just to ignore the problem and just to face it and do nothing about it. So keep in mind that your competition is the direct, the indirect, the potential one, but also any kind of inaction. Now, another very important topic we already covered a little bit in the previous slides is that of the differentiation between the value that you provide and the technology. When you are going to sell something to someone, you should state what they are going to earn if they buy your solution. You shouldn't focus on the how or the technical means. For example, it is much better, or on the opposite manner, if you focus on the technicalities, you may present a factual offering that states, buy my solution, but because you will get storage for 1 gigabyte of MP3s. Okay, this is a technical presentation of what you offer. But presenting this offering is much more impactful and correct, because here what the actual buyer earns is much clearer. Likewise, when you present your solution to investors, it should be clear what your customers will earn, and you shouldn't focus that much on the actual technology and technicalities you use. For example, the fact that you are using the latest state-of-the-art AI or blockchain or IoT sensors or space data doesn't matter if the value you provide is not good enough for the potential customer. Likewise, you shouldn't mix up the unique selling proposition you have with a competitive advantage. The unique selling proposition is a customer-centric approach to answering why the customer will choose you over any other competitor. So here we have a very nice Venn diagram where we have these specific areas, what your brand does well, what the competition does well, and what the customer wants. The ideal area you want to focus on is here. What you do well, what your competition does not offer, and what your customer wants. Any other area is not for you. If there is something that the competition does better than you and the customer wants, then it may not be worth extending towards this direction. If both you and the competition do the same thing here, then you may need to stress out other points of differentiation. And of course, if you are both building things that are not relevant to the customer, then you are probably getting into this percentage of companies failing due to not addressing a specific market need. So this is the unique selling proposition, answering why the customers want to buy for you. Now, there are some topics of comparison between entities that are not important to the customer, but are very important for the companies. So if you have more resources than competitors, or better expertise, or a wider network, or you are ahead when it comes to development or research or penetrating a market, or if you have managed to secure specific intellectual property, all these characteristics are advantages that get you ahead of competition, but are of course irrelevant to the customer. So this is the actual differentiation between the unique selling proposition, which is customer-centric, and the competitive advantages that are more related to the company's inner workings and logistics, etc. So, likewise, the focus of comparison should be in different matrices. You should have a different matrix for the comparison on the unique selling proposition. So if you are using a new model that provides greater precision and greater reliability and greater speed, all of these things are value that you offer. So these should be points of comparison with the other entities. And likewise, if you want to compare yourself on the competitive advantage point of view, then you would need a separate table for that. Now, most of the time in the pitch deck, the tendency is to present a customer-centric comparison focused on the unique selling proposition. So keep in mind that unlike this specific table, the points of comparison you should present here should not be technicalities or competitive advantages, but points of interest for the actual customer, which is translated to specific value. Now, about the market, as it was stated, you should try to quantify it. If you cannot find numbers for this, you should make an assumptions and make some estimations about it. But yet again, as in the case of a competition, you should also be honest about the size of the market. So this is an actual screenshot from a pitch deck we got from a startup that was presenting the market on which they were working in 2024. So the presentation was into 2024, and you can see that the data we've provided are till 2021. Why? Because in 2022, we had the at least official end of the pandemic, so the revenues for the sector actually dropped a little bit here. And since they wanted to avoid showing this view of the market, they just skipped it. This is not a good strategy because investors and all the other audience are not idiots. And even if they have very good advisors. So the truth at some point will come to the surface. And in any case, such kind of, let's say, incomplete analysis hurts not only the business plan you present, but the actual view that the company of yours should have for its own good. So having a clear view of the market analysis is not something you do for the sake of the investors. You do it first and foremost for the sake of your own company and in order to build a proper business plan of your own, regardless of going through the cycle of hunting for investments. Now, we are almost done. You should, on the matter of quantification of the market, the focus should not be on the very big pie and the overall market, but you should try to zoom in space and time and get as good and analytical information as you can in order to have various, let's say, customer segments and identifications of the actual status of the market. For example, if beyond getting the overall size of a market, you also identify how this market is distributed geographically, it may be also possible for you in the future to identify which geographical areas may be the ones you want to target first in the future. So it may make sense for you to work first, not on your home country, but try to get your first sales in, I don't know, Japan or Italy. And after that, once you've established yourselves based on the nice market analysis you have, you may find out that the next country you should focus on is, for example, UK. So the more information, granulated information you get, the more elaborate your business plan can be and your go-to-market strategy can be, and the better you will be able to defend your proposition to potential investors. Finally, when it comes to acquiring data, you should make sure that any kind of information, any number, any statistical view you present in your pitch deck can be defended by your side. This means that you should have a very clear view of your sources. For every number you've included in your pitch deck, you should keep somewhere else the corresponding references and sources you used. And for any number you extracted on your own, you should document somewhere the assumptions you used, because most probably you will need them yet again in the future in order to make updates, or you may be asked internally by your team or externally by, for example, investors to cross-check again this information, so you would have to go back to the source. Working on the current status of the widespread usage of generative AI, ChatGPT or any similar tools are not a source themselves, okay? Of course, you can use them in order to acquire some introductory information, but you should be extremely doubtful about the results. At least in my work, up till now, I'm not quite happy with any results they've provided. And for domains I'm quite aware of and trained on, I see that they make huge mistakes. So yes, do use them as a first approach, but also request sources from them. Maybe use them only to find such resources. Check the sources themselves and what is written in them, because in some cases these tools may provide a number and a source, but if you study the source, you will find no such information. And of course, don't trust them when it comes to doing math. Okay, in this case, unfortunately, you still have to make it on your own. So ensure that all this kind of information is defensible and it's something that you have access to directly. A final point, a very common bias we see that many companies have is the so-called 1% fallacy. So when we ask companies how many customers you expect to have, or what percentage of the market you expect to get, the answer from quite many of them is 1%. And when we ask them, why is it 1% and not 1.2%, for example, they say that it just sounds like a nice number. It's quite small and it's a nice example. This is the worst possible, let's say, analysis you can present when it comes to estimations about the market you want to capture. The percentage you can actually get from the market should actually be based on specific facts and specific assumptions you make, and it shouldn't be just a nice magical number that looks nice. And this is actually a nice table that explains that this fallacy is also dangerous because it underestimates how hard it is actually to capture 1% of any market. So here you can see a statistical analysis for companies working on the information and communications technology sector when it comes to capturing 1%. So if there are 100 companies working on a specific solution, in order for one of them to capture at least 1%, they have to be at the top 19. And the more the number of companies increases, the higher the company has to be in ranking in order to acquire 1%. So if your solution to become millionaires is to find a multi-billion market and assume that you will get 1% just because, this is not the right approach to present to investors. So thank you very much for your attention. I know it was a quite long presentation, not one that is recommended due to the attention span of people, but I hope that you all got at least one tip that may be useful for you in the future. I think, Katerina, we could open up the floor for any questions.
Yes, indeed. Actually, thank you first for this very insightful presentation. So now you could also open your mics, or you can write us in the chat if you have any questions, and we can answer to you.
Okay, in the meanwhile, I went through the chat. I don't think I missed any questions related to the topic of the session. So yeah, I think we are clear.
Okay, indeed, I don't see any questions. Okay, let's just give that 2 minutes and then we can wrap up.
I see one question from Andrea, whether these kinds of pitches have different names. The answer is no. It's pitch deck for all of them. Now, for your own sanity, it's better to use some kind of codes or naming internally. So you may want to have an extended online version and name it like this, or I don't know, short physical version or whatever. So I don't have any advice on proper naming to provide beyond that. So make sure you have a proper version control and naming for your case.
I think we have a question here by Alexandru.
Hello. Love the presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you very much for the insights. You've talked about, I think it was after the problem and solution, after the very first. I saw that the topic was the magic. Could you talk about more about what that implies? So the magic of the solution or the company itself, the strategy, what were you referring to?
It's about the solution most of the time. It's something you may need to use if your solution is based on a technology or science but it's not that well known. For example, is you are doing quantum whatever, or it's about pharmaceuticals and you need some extra information to be conveyed as background to the investors. That's where you have to present it. It's not necessary, but it may be quite useful when the topic is not that well known or some extra domain knowledge is necessary to grasp what is actually being done here. For example, I've been in presentations where they presented to me the actual solution and I had no idea what it was about. But, after explaining a little bit how the market works, what's the science behind it, I was able to capture it.
Thank you. Oh, I think I got it then. Thanks.
Yes. About the question from Estebaz Ferreiro, what is the most common mistake founders make? Actually, the second part of the presentation, which was about what you should not do in a presentation, is common mistakes we've seen from companies. So I'm not going to rank them, but all 11 mistakes that have been presented are actually things that we've seen in startups, and they are quite common. About the 1% fallacy, actually, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. For my case, I would say that 30 or 40% of the pitch decks I see include this magic number. In case you go in and vet in the future, I challenge you to pay attention to this and check yourself whether this number appears. That's something quite common. I see a question from Gianluca about pitch for partners. In this case, actually, you don't have to make too many adaptations. Of course, there are slides you shouldn't include, for example, related to the financials, unless you have some kind of proposition. So you tell them how much money they will also make through this endeavor. But I would say that more or less all the other slides are similar. I mean, the problem you want to resolve is the same. The solution may need some kind of adaptation to explain to them what's the role of the partners. You have yet again to present your team. You also have to persuade them why they should collaborate with you and not someone else. So yes, I would say that for a presentation to the partners, there are quite many common topics. I see a nice statement from Ignacio about the need to have some kind of attraction. Okay, this goes back to the initial topic of knowing very well your audience. We get many comments from startups that we know investors, they want you to already have a lot of sales and be scalable, and they will not pay for ideas, etc. This is true, but for a very specific type of investors. So what you should identify is that there are quite many different types of investors. And there are actually investors that want exactly the opposite. they want to invest on the early stage startups that may not even have their first sales ready. For example, from our side, from Coralia, with an entity we are working on, Coralia Ventures, this is actually the case. We are looking for university spin-offs, ideally, that have a very nice technology that is innovative, but they don't have sales yet. Why? Internal secret. I will not share it with you. But yes, in this case, it's the opposite. If we see a company that doesn't have that much technological innovation, we don't care whether they have already millions and millions in revenues. If they do, they're out of our range. So we don't want such startups. So yeah, my advice here is to study a little bit more the kinds of investors you target, their portfolio, their criteria, and yeah, go and talk to the correct ones and not lose your time with non-relevant entities. I think we don't have any other questions or comments on the chat.
Okay, so in that case, I would like to thank everyone for participating today, and also thank your Orpheus for this presentation. If you have additional questions after the session, please feel free to contact us. Before we close, I would also like to remind you that our next session will take place this Friday. So we expect to see you there. And once again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And bye.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
To the next
Very
session.
interesting.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye bye. Take care.
Bye bye.
Very interesting.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.